All right, we're here with Karen Smith, and anybody who is a kettlebell or bodyweight training nerd uh, definitely knows who you are. But maybe for those who don't, Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself and your leadership role in the Strong First organization.
Okay, well, I've been training for a really long time, been into fitness my whole life. Was a gymnastics coach early on when I was in school, and then years later found myself deciding that personal training was what I wanted to do, and so I did that, and then obviously, like a lot of people, found the kettlebell, and from there met Pavel and fast track to where I'm at now. I am a master instructor. I teach the level one and level two kettlebell certifications. I run the body weight, or was running the body weight before we kind of merged it all under one kind of umbrella. And yeah, I mean, I've been lucky and honored to travel around the world and teach what I love and share the kettlebell, share the body weight. Like it's what I'm passionate about, and I love kind of giving people those aha moments with those modalities, or the body being the modality. But yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Cool. And as someone who's taken at least a few of your workshops and seminars, those aha moments, like they keep coming.
Yeah,
And one of the reasons why I so enjoy going to certs and workshops is because even when you're in this game for so long, it's stereotypical, but it's true. There's always something to work on. And when you have an expert eye on your movements, they will probably fish it out real fast.
absolutely.
So that's always your shortcut. So before we start recording, we were just chatting about um, the early days back in Northern Virginia, and you mentioned that you got invited to your, I guess, first kettlebell certification, and you didn't quite know what you were getting into.
Yeah, no, I had and this may be on some other podcast somewhere, but the military had moved us to DC, and I had never really been in the snow. It was cold, like I was miserable. I had a 3-year-old. I had taken time off work to be a stay-at-home mom for a little while. And the Gold's Gym nearby would allow me to put her in childcare for 2 hours a day. So I pretty much lived at the Gold's because I didn't want to be in the cold. I didn't know anyone. So I got in there, and there was a coach teaching kettlebells. And I was like, that's something I don't know. I just want someone to tell me what to do for a while. And I picked up the kettlebell, and he felt I was picking it up really quickly. And he's like, hey, you should go to this certification with me. I didn't know really what to expect. I didn't know who Pavel was. I didn't like, I just, I had been a stay at home mom for the last 3 years. So I'd kind of taken a break from coaching. And when I went to the cert with him, it was like, I kind of joke the heavens opened. Like I found my people. It's like I finally knew, like, okay, I need to be back into coaching. This is what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. But yeah, I went to that certification thinking I was having a mom's weekend. I hadn't taken any trips since I'd had my daughter. So 3 years, like doing mom, everything mom day in, day out. And then I got to that cert and I just loved it. And I remember them saying at that weekend, they're like, why are you smiling so much? Like, I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was fun. And it was just like, I felt like I was in the right place and found my people. And so that was kind of where everything opened up from there and fast tracked to where I'm at now.
So what did that, if you recall like the details, what did that weekend look like? Was there the snatch test? Were there the strength and technique tests? Um, what was that like?
Well, we still, I mean, all of that was still there, right? It was different. So when I went to my first certification, the first thing you do is warm up. Well, everyone knows, like in a big room, right? We're in a gymnasium. Everyone introduces themselves, and then you warm up as a group, and they're like, "Okay, go snatch test." So it was the first thing you do is snatch test. We have no one's even like really knows how to snatch yet, right? Maybe a few people, but you go to do the snatch test. And back then it was by weight class, right? So you would weigh in and they would tell you what bell you could use and how many reps. So it was no set down, one hand switch. You couldn't stop and chalk up. You couldn't, it was just like you go and you go. So for me, it was like, it's weird when something, if you only know it one way, you think it's hard, right? So like I weighed in and they're like, you can use a 12 kilo and you can do 60 reps, or you can use a 16 kilo and do 30 reps. So I'm like, well, I'm going for the 16 for sure, right? And I'm going to do my 30 reps. But back then that seemed hard. I mean, can you imagine now, like 15 and 15, one hand switch, and I was like huffing and puffing because it's all I knew, right? Well, then I'm hooked. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this cert, which was challenging. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but I decided to sign up for the level 2. Like as soon as I was done, I'm like, I'm signing up for the next year. I'm coming back for level 2. I just loved all of it. Well, then they had changed it. So by the time I came back a year later for level 2, it was the 100 rep snatch test. Now you could switch hands, you could set it down, but you still had that 100 reps in 5 minutes. And the weight class at that point, if you were for females, if you were over 130, no, it wasn't. That's what it is now. If you were over 123 and a half, you had to use a 16. And every cert that I went to until they changed it to the 130, I would weigh in like half a pound over what I needed to use
Of
the 20.
course.
So I always had to do the 16. So I went from that 30 reps in one year to where I had to do 100 reps the next year. So it was just like a big change. But we made it happen, and it was fun. It was I was in St. Paul when I did my first cert, and I remember you have to carry your kettlebell everywhere. You had, every time a plane went over, we had to do swings or burpees, just a lot of things. It was very military like, but I loved that. I mean, I grew up with my family, being military, law enforcement, firefighters. And then at the time I was also married to someone in the military. So for me, it was fine. Like it was like, I really enjoyed it, where other people were just like, this is so, at the time, you probably remember this because I don't know what year you went through, but I remember it was in the early times where people were just really thought we were a cult, that we were crazy, and that we were all just this cult for being so military in structure. But I mean,
For sure.
I felt like I really like thrived in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I certainly don't want to pit myself into a weird corner here, but there's something to be said about, the root word of culture is, you might put those together. So there is something powerful about having such a strong culture, um, having such strong standards, and just having like this ethos that people can gather around, that is, on the face of it, you might say, maybe these people are taking themselves a little too seriously. And
Right.
those are valid criticisms for sure. But there's also just just being able to tap into human psychology, because we're all humans here. How are you going to get the best performance out of people? People need to be bought in,
Right. For sure.
and there's certainly many ways to like do that. And the way that, at least over the course of time, the kettlebell community, or what have you, has leveraged that ethos of like, we're here to like not mess around. We're here to make sure that you know your stuff, and you're going to prove it. And that obviously travels down the line to where, hey, if you're even tangentially interested in this stuff, you got to make sure that you put your money where your mouth is,
Right.
put your time in the gym. And again, certainly that's not always necessarily a perfect system, but especially when you're talking about a grassroots thing taking hold of, like the wider fitness culture. I mean, I think that's why the kettlebell is probably still around, or is probably bigger than ever today, is because it got started in this incubation, if you will, of like people who were serious about being the best. At least that's the message that I got.
Mhm.
Not to turn this interview around to me, but like as a young person, as a young man, having never even thought twice about going into the military or anything like that, when I was getting into fitness, and I saw this community, and I saw the curriculum, and I saw like how people presented themselves as professionals, I was like, I may or may not want to be that person, but that's a person that I know I need to learn from
Hmm.
to be a practitioner of the craft.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that's the only thing that spoke to me.
Yeah, I think it's really important because it gives you something to be excited about, right? To be to work towards, and you want it more and appreciate it more if you have to work for it, right? I mean, it's just like as a kid who is given everything and doesn't have to work for anything, doesn't necessarily maybe appreciate things the way that you would if you had to work for it from the beginning, you know? So I think that's something that we um, really still stand by, is that we're not just going to give that certificate to everyone. We have standards. You need to meet those standards, not just in your own physical ability. Obviously, that's one of them, but also in your coaching ability. Like, we don't want to just put a bunch of coaches out into the world that don't really know how to coach, right? I mean, there's enough of that on social media, right? I mean, that's kind of everywhere nowadays. It's like everyone's the expert, but we really want the people that come through to kind of understand our beliefs, our principles, our standards, like why we do what we do. And some of it may seem, like you said, kind of very structured and hard ass, but I think it produces people that have a better eye for the details. And we're not just out kind of throwing a bell around, or same thing like we're going to be talking about with body weight, just with no structure, right? And I think that's what keeps people safe. It keeps people in the journey. I mean, in the system, or on their journey longer, like a training for life, not training for today, injured tomorrow, start over, and repeating that cycle, right? We want people to be able to be strong for life and just keep moving forward. So I think that's where our system really works. There's going to be the ones that go off and do other things, and not that that's wrong. It's just different. And so this is the way that we approach it.
Totally. Well, thinking back to my cert in 2012, you were one of the team leaders in Vienna, Virginia, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And that was one of the last big RKCs with the evil Russian himself at the helm. And as most people know, kind of soon after that, Strong First kind of came into its own under Pavel's leadership. And it was the curriculum expanded to not just kettlebell, but also barbell and bodyweight training.
Right.
And this to me was very, very exciting because, I love kettlebell as much as the next guy. But especially at the time, I was getting very involved in powerlifting,
Mhm.
competitive powerlifting, and just being kind of a smaller guy, maybe built maybe a little bit like a gymnast. The body weight stuff always came very naturally to me. And my favorite book when I was really getting into Pavel's stuff, as you can imagine, was Naked Warrior.
Yeah.
And the pistol squat was like the first exercise that I can remember like seeing on paper and thinking, this is physically impossible. I don't, I do not see how a
Yeah. Right.
one-legged, how a one-legged ass to grass squat is possible. Um, and I really just read through that, book several times and really took my time with all the progressions and of course getting into like the mobility stuff and whatnot. Um, and lo and behold, after a few months, I got a pistol squat and I had to show it to everybody.
Yes.
Don't don't you know? I said, "Hey mom, hey dad, hey sister, check this out." And maybe the first time, like they're kind of impressed, and then maybe it gets a little annoying after a while. But these are the things that when you're young and you've got the needs to do pistol squats all day.
Yeah.
These are the things that happen.
Well,
But
definitely,
that also, Mhm.
that it definitely becomes people's party trick when they first get it.
Oh yeah. Oh, and then when you go out to the bar, I mean, forget about it.
Yeah.
Um, but those are some other stories. But it was an illuminating moment because it was the first time I really had this A to Z moment for just like being exposed to a movement that I honestly thought was probably impossible
Right.
to then being able to do it and being able to understand like the progressions along the way. And this is kind of like before I was, a certified personal trainer, before I was like really working with people like as a fitness coach or anything like that. And that was also, kind of in the, as I was kind of discovering kettlebells in general as well. But all that to say, I could really see how kettlebells and bodyweight training were like the peanut butter and jelly of minimalist training.
Right.
And so, yeah, so in those early days when I saw that Strong First was coming out with a bodyweight curriculum, I was totally on board. So that actually became the first um, Strong First seminar that I attended was a bodyweight seminar, and it was incredible.
I'm glad. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely good curriculum. Still to this day, I mean, I've been teaching it now for 11 years, I think, all over the world, which has been amazing. I still love that people come in and they have those aha moments, right? They start to understand and master their body and what they can do with it and how they can use it for strength versus just calisthenics, and cardio, right? Um, but the fact that when they come in, they still, more than anything else, I hear, oh my God, I should have done this sooner. Why didn't I do this sooner? This would have made everything else easier. I get that more than anything else after they attend the cert. So I still love that. That's, I mean, there's just so much to keep adding to it and so many progressions, regressions, the way that we can look at the body. And that's how I try to teach that cert is I want you to be strong, but I want you to have the eye for all those fine little details and make sure that you can look at the person you're training and be able to point out, like, why are they struggling with that one arm push up? Why are they not doing a pistol, right? Like, if you understand pistols, you read about them, you thought they were, you know, something that could not happen, and then you found it and were able to do it. So by showing people that there's so much to it, it's not just, am I strong enough, right? Because some people are strong enough to get up if they can get down, but they're not mobile enough to get down. And then some of the people that are mobile enough to get down aren't strong enough to get up. So it's finding the right detail. Is it their balance, flexibility, stability, or strength? And being able to kind of take that exercise apart, as Pavel would say, right? He's taught us to reverse engineer movement. So we look at someone and we're able to pull the exercise apart and find the little details that are keeping them from getting the full picture and then piece it back together. And that's what I love about our system is that you can do that with any exercise. It's just understanding the body, looking at people from all different angles and seeing what's going on with them and what's keeping them from getting to that next level of strength or ability.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard you say this before, and I would agree that the Strong First bodyweight course or cert for a lot of people would be the best place to start before getting into kettlebells and then certainly getting into barbells. For all those reasons that you just said, anything else off the top of your mind of why you feel like the really being exposed to the hard style methodology through body weight first? Any other things that come to you off the top of your head of why that's maybe the best place for so many people to start?
I think that it gives you, because we break it down, that certification is not about volume, right? It's not about just beating people into the ground. Not that the kettlebell is 100% beating people into the ground. Some people feel that way because they don't come in prepared. But what we focus on is understanding your body and building full body tension, right? So we talk about linkage of tension versus leakage of tension, right? And I think when someone starts to understand where they're plugging those holes of leakage and understanding mastering their whole body and being full body tension to do the strength skills, when they take that back to other modalities, they're going to hit PRs. I tell people all the time, if you're training for the one arm push up, don't do any other pressing, right? And Pavel says that in the manual and in his programming is, if you're trying to get this one arm push up, focus on that. And people are always scared. They're like, oh, but I'm going to lose my military press, or I'm going to lose my bench press, or I'm going to lose all these things. But I'm just like, just trust me, right? If I can get people to trust me and do what we're doing with the one arm push up, the carryover is so amazing that they go back to those other skills. And at the minimum, they're maintaining them, right? But most of the time they've PR'd a lift just by understanding full body tension that's required for the one arm or the one arm, one leg push up. So then when you go back to the military press or the bench press or any of those, it's automatically stronger because you've taken your whole body into it versus just thinking about where's the bell going and what's my arm doing, right? It's about your whole body from your feet to your head. It's all connected. And that's what we teach in Bodyweight. And I think that's what gives people those aha moments so quickly, because we've decreased the volume, but we've increased the tension. And then we've increased all of the different cues and all of the different progressions to get people there. So it really can be for anyone, not just somebody that wants to, do a one arm push up. It's just the progressions to get you to the one arm push up are going to skyrocket all your other skills as well.
Totally. Yeah, love it. And as I'm looking over my old, I only say old because, as you probably do, you have a stack of these manuals. And of course they're not in chronological order, but I think this is a manual from the first time I went to the Dome.
Okay.
Team music, Renata and help me remember her husband's name.
Gary.
Gary. Yes. Yeah, what a pair.
Yes.
So as I'm looking over my table of contents here, we've got the one arm, one leg push up, the tactical pull up, the pistol, the handstand push up, the hanging leg raise, and then, a smattering of assistance exercises. Again, when I first kind of saw the curriculum there, at first I was like, doesn't seem like enough.
Mm-hmm.
See, it seems like we should have, it seems like we should have twice as many exercises. But then,
Right.
of course, you actually go through the experience, you go through the weekend, and then, of course, then you realize, well, under each one of these lifts is, dozens of progressions.
Right.
And then when you kind of reach, let's say, the standard or the mastery level of all of these moves, there really isn't anything else to do. I mean, practically for most people. So you just think like, if you're a stud with your one arm push up, your strict pull up, your strict pistol, strict handstand push up, strict hanging leg raise. I mean, we only have 2 arms and 2 legs. So it's like, that really does cover practically all of your bases.
Mm-hmm. And you know what I find too, with most of those moves, not the pull up, but with the rest, it's the unilateral approach to things, right? When you can do all of these moves, the pistol, the one arm push up or one arm, one leg, it forces you to it exposes asymmetries, right? So for me, I feel like the more I can do unilateral work, the stronger I'm going to be in everything else I do when I go back to it. So we've got the single leg deadlift, we've got the pistols, we've got the airborne lunges. Obviously they're all in that progression category, but they can help other exercises as well. And I love that they expose asymmetries and allow you to fix them, right? Everybody's going to have some sort of asymmetry, but if you're always doing everything bilateral, you don't necessarily know where something else is causing a problem until you break it down and you look at it. So the more I do that, I feel like people become more balanced, they become more connected, and then they can go back to the other skills and they're going to automatically be stronger. So that's the thing that I love about it. Not only is it just, okay, we're doing these cool strength skills, but we're able to assess the body better and look at it on a bigger scale. And then again, go back to the piecing it back together. It's the reverse engineering the movement and finding what people need to kind of plug those holes so that they can do anything else.
Totally. Yeah. And something that I will kind of often say, especially when it comes to like military pressing, I like to tell my clients to get their minds in what their feet and their hips and their core is doing. And I always say, like, if you're standing up doing an exercise, it is first a foot movement, or maybe foot isometric, if you will, because that's your source of stability, and everything moves from there. So you're not gonna hit a heavy military press if you're standing on a sharp rock, okay? Or you're on a waterbed. And of course, we all know the saying, you can't fire a cannon from a canoe and that whole thing. And so then when I kind of extrapolate that to practically all manner of lifting, it's kind of like I almost think that like it's all body weight exercise.
Mhm.
It's really just when you're holding weights, you're really just making your body heavier. Um, that's kind of my head way of thinking about it. So if you can't just tighten up your muscles and press an imaginary kettlebell,
Mhm.
if you can actually like do that with, again, what we've been talking about here, proper body linkage, proper tension, if you can't do that, then when we actually put a kettlebell in your hand, weird little things are going to pop and crack, down the line.
Yeah,
So that's another reason why just body weight is so powerful.
yeah, it's so important because just like you're saying, so let's say someone has a kettlebell, right? And they're going to do a press. How often do we see someone start focusing on the bell first, right? The handle, and they start this way, right? Like that's not a very strong movement pattern, right? So if we can get them to understand feed forward tension, right? So maximally contracting the body without an external load, and get them in the proper movement pattern. So yeah, we start here, but we don't want to focus here first, right? We want to focus here first, right? We want to focus, and like you said, if you're standing up on your feet and kind of work those links up, be connected and rooted to the ground, and start to help them understand that pattern of driving from the elbow. It's the same thing here, right? So if I'm in a one arm push up, I don't want to think about just what is my pec doing. I want to think about, am I connected in my lat? Am I pushing through my palm? I'm not just pushing straight forward, right? The aha moment for a lot of people with a press is to think about going further with it. And what I mean by that is if I'm trying to do a one arm push up, I'm not just straightening my arm out. I want to visualize that I'm pushing so hard through my palm. I'm connecting my lat. I'm driving from my elbow, almost as if I'm trying to drive up. Now I'm in that military press stance, right? Or pattern, almost to that overhead. And I know there used to be those machines in the gym, whatever, the pullover machine. Is that what
Oh
that's
yeah.
called? I mean, it's been so long, but that's how I try to teach people to understand connecting their whole body. It's not a just straight my arm out. It's I want to get into that push up, whether it be a regular push up or one arm. And I want to think that I'm actually pushing through the ground and up and overhead to kind of really connect the rest of my body to it. So that's one of the big aha moments people have is they don't just think about like I'm just straightening my arm out, right? They think about what are my feet doing? What are my hips doing? What is my core doing? What's my lat doing in that process to make it all linked together? So I think that's one of my favorite things about that is it's like if you have this visualization of something greater in the process versus just straightening your arm out, the sky's the limit on the strength that you can gain.
For sure. And that reminds me, one of the things that always stuck with me from the Naked Warrior book is Pavel's imagery of blowing up the animal balloon like from your foot up your leg like into your diaphragm into your core, and then like extending it out,
Mm-hmm.
crunching it up and extending it out. And so that was like an aha moment for me. And it's interesting, it's like we, or at least I, can be guilty of cueing clients into oblivion. So I think, one of the things that behooves us all as coaches is to not just use fewer cues, but just like make sure that like they're actually effective.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole idea of like visualizing these lines that actually go through multiple joints, um, is something that I can sometimes communicate better with some people than others, and
Yeah.
certain exercises versus others. But the pistol, and certainly that one arm push up, visualizing the energy going through the hand into
Mm-hmm.
the center and back out, so powerful. And it just seems to, you can actually feel and see the difference, I think, so much more clearly with body weight moves versus other weighted resistance moves, because sometimes like people will be wobbly and all over the place, and you can like tell them to do one thing and then suddenly whoop,
Mhm.
you can see they just kind of find that balance.
I think that it's amazing too that people don't um, feel the errors, right? Like they think that this form is dialed in, they're doing everything that you're saying. And that's why visualizing it helps, but also for some people being able to show them and then have them go back and visualize, right? Like if you do a video of them from different angles, they don't realize like the military press. I know we're talking mostly body weight, but the military press is one where I see it the most, is how many people, when it gets heavy, they want to lean away, right? They want to open up and compensate the movement, and they feel like they're straight, right? They feel like they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's one of the biggest thing is like show them the movement pattern of how, like show them themselves on video and then give them the visualization, kind of that little bit of a breakdown, because you don't want to give too much too soon, right? But if you can show them, not just with yourself being a demo, but show them a video of where they're at and what they're doing, and then give the cue of visualization and how to clean up that twisting or opening or whatever you want to call it. Because if we just start saying, stand up straighter, get tighter, like don't lean over, and they're like, but I'm not leaning over, right? Because they don't realize that they're in that compensation pattern. I think sometimes they have to see it and see their own movement line and then walk them through and give them just one more cue that's going to like link everything up. It's kind of how I look at things.
Absolutely. um yeah, visualization can be used, I think, powerfully like on a rep by rep basis.
Mhm.
And then also visualizing one big performance, one big PR. And you are obviously one of the few Iron Maidens out there. And I know, just kind of obviously hearing you talk about your programming a lot, you've mentioned that visualization was a big part of your training and your success.
Mhm.
So if you wouldn't mind, expand on that a little bit. And when you are so advanced and strong and knowledgeable and you're a top elite coach, it's almost like visualization is almost like the last piece of fertile ground to make actual change, because your muscles are only going to get so much bigger. I mean, obviously we can all get stronger, but you can't train 24/7, but you can almost visualize
Yeah.
24/7.
Um, well, I'm glad you mentioned the Iron. So the Iron Maiden, I would say that that's probably when I really started using visualization. That was the one piece that like I was in this moment of being stuck, kind of like figuring out that last little bit of training. I was getting stronger and but I was kind of hitting this moment of just plateau. And I think it's taught me how powerful our mind is. And I actually just did a workshop for Exos on mindset just recently, because that moment of starting to use the visualization for success in a challenge, right? Getting your mind right. Um, the more you can visualize yourself doing something successful and accomplishing that movement, and then accomplishing it with people around, right? So that's how I train people now, because it's one of the things that worked for me, or at least I try to use that with people. So visualization of a breath path is one way in training, right? Visualizing a movement pattern, but also visualizing your setting. Like if you're going into a competition, right, and you do powerlifting, so I think this would be probably something you do or would be helpful with you guys, is you want to visualize the movements, you want to visualize your setup, you want to visualize the crowd, right? And you want to see yourself in your mind hundreds of times actually doing it successful, right? Getting the, what is it in powerlifting, the white lights? Is that
Yep,
right?
three white lights.
You want those 3 white lights. So why would you not visualize that every time you do your setup, right? You close your eyes and you're like, okay, this is my setup. This is how I'm going to do this. And you visualize yourself doing it. Well, don't just stop there. Visualize yourself seeing those 3 white lights, right? Or seeing yourself do those things. So I would lay in bed at night close my eyes, and I would visualize. The one that was the hardest for me at the time was the pull up. So I would visualize my setup. Where are my hands going? How is the bell on my belt? What is my body line? I'd visualize myself pulling and hitting right where I wanted to hit. And I would visualize the crowd, and I would visualize everybody cheering, because I was like, I'm not coming to play. I'm not coming to try this. I'm coming to do this. And I didn't even tell anyone at that event that I was doing it. I showed up to that workshop. It was the Easy Strength workshop. And at the time, I hadn't read the Easy Strength book. So I didn't know that a lot of my training kind of fell into that style of programming. So I get there, and I see Pavel the first day, and I was like, hey, do you think maybe we can do the Iron Maiden this weekend? And he looks at me and he's like, think I can make time for that. And so I just knew, I was like, I'm doing this. There's no, I'm trying, or I think I'm going to give this a go. It was like, I trained for it. I visualized it. I've seen it successful hundreds of times. So that's what I did. And then since then in the training, so when I start with someone new, it's just programming, right? And I'm visualizing the movements, having them visualize movements and breath path and technique. But as we get closer to the deadline of the event, whatever it is, Iron Maiden, Beast Tamer, I do a lot of training with people for that still to this day. If they're doing something barbell related or whatever it is, I add that layer of coaching into it. Let's start looking at our mind and seeing and visualizing the success of that movement. And sometimes I even do it at certs. If I see people that are stressing before they get to testing, I have everybody lay down in crocodile breathing, and I'm like, okay, let's walk through this. I want you to visualize yourself over there in front of whoever the coach is, whether it be me or someone else. I want you to visualize your setup. I want you to visualize what test you're doing, and I want you to visualize passing it. Like, you need to do that before you get there. And I think that I think it's huge. Our mind can really play tricks on us. If we don't think we can do something, there's any little bit of doubt, it can completely throw you off. So I think it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. In music, they say if you can hear it, you can play it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't hear it, you probably are not going to be able to play it. So yeah, it just goes to show that the mind is an endlessly kind of mysterious thing. But let's not forget that at the end of the day, it's all nerves, and it's motor neurons, and it's the central nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, doing reps mentally, we've kind of all heard, like, the studies of like the people who practice physically, the people who practice mentally, and the people who do both. I believe basketball free throws is usually like the study that people reference. People who just visualize do almost as good as like the people who actually physically practice. And then of course the people who do both,
Yeah,
absolutely go to the
I
moon.
100% agree with that. And I do tell people, kind of like you were saying, if you can't hear it, you can't play it. I tell people that if you can't see it, if you can't see yourself completing whatever it is, the challenge, the movement, whatever, successfully in your mind, you're not ready. Right? It doesn't matter how strong you are. If you can't see it successful, you're not ready for it yet. So we really work on that mindset. And then I use the mindset similar to what you just said, is when I had to go through my hysterectomy, and they were like, well, you can't lift anything more than 10 pounds for 6 weeks. And I was like, come on, there's got to be a way that I can do that. I'm used to lifting 2 times my body weight in my deadlift, and you're telling me I can't lift 10 pounds. So there's got to be something that my training has allowed me to be not the norm, right? I guess I was a little cocky. They're like, oh, all the fascia is the same, like rest. So what I did during that time is I visualized my one arm push-up and my military press the whole time when I couldn't lift, because they told me I had to wait 6 weeks to train. Well, at the 8-week mark post-op, I was teaching a bodyweight cert in Italy. I was like, I can't go in not being able to do what I need to do. Like, I have to still be able to do this. And maybe not. I mean, I know people understand that there's assistants and there's other people that can do the demos, but in my mind, I always want to walk the walk. So I was like, I need to be able, in case someone says, hey, I want to see that, like, I needed to be able to do it. So at the 8-week mark, I hadn't lost any strength. I was still strong enough to do my one arm push-up. I could still press my 16 kilo. That's always just kind of been my baseline since that first cert ever. So when I'm in a place where I can't physically train the way that I want, right, which happens a lot with travel, I still have my body. and I still have my mind. And so I can do that pattern of visualization and that full body tension and mimic a movement pattern without a load and keep my strength. And so that's what I try to teach people. It's like, don't think that because you are traveling, you can't train, right? Or you can't train enough. I mean, I'm like right here in this place where I have one kettlebell with me for this last 2 weeks. It's 12 kilo, but I have a countertop. I have, a windowsill. I have, like, it doesn't matter. I can still be doing one arm push-ups anywhere, not have to be on the ground because I'm visualizing every rep, no matter where I'm at. It's still as if I'm on the ground. So if someone throws it at me, I can do that. So that's just kind of how I try to teach my clients or students or whatever to use their mind to make themselves stronger in all of their movement patterns.
Amen. Now, of course, a lot of people, unfortunately, have the opposite problem where they've got a negative mindset and they're always imagining themselves not doing well.
Right.
And it could be like, unfortunately, probably not too much, thankfully, these days, but over the course of, my training career, I've unfortunately seen this a lot where people are like strong, capable, and it's like, I know what you can do, but you don't know what you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what, by the workshop that I just mentioned that I did for Exos, on mindset in my research, because I knew how I felt in mindset, but I was like, I wanted to look up other things. So there can be that fixed mindset or a growth mindset, right? So it doesn't matter how strong you are. If you have a fixed mindset, which can actually begin when you're a child, it's how you're talked to, it's how you're labeled, it's how, if you're spoken to in a negative way, you already have this self-image about who you are and who you're supposed to be, right? It starts when we're young. And there are ways to get out of the fixed mindset into a growth mindset. It takes practice, right? And it takes persistence. And that's where you have to have positive affirmations. You have to like really kind of start practicing to get your mind to believe that you can do the things that we know as coaches, right? We can see people all the time that are able and physically strong enough to do things, but then they can't do it, right? Like I've seen it with pull-ups. There's ladies that are like, I want to get my first pull-up. And all I have to do, I can see them and I see how strong they are, but they're stalling out. If I put my fingers on their back, right? And then it just happens. And they think that I helped them. I'm like, I didn't even push you, right? It was all you, but in your mind, you were limiting your abilities because you thought I can't do this, or I can't do that. Or we've been told as females for, it's getting better, right? But for a long time, women can't do pull-ups. You need to do girly push-ups. You need like that we're not capable. So it's getting out of that fixed mindset and going into a growth mindset. Where do you want to be? How do you want to use your mind? And one thing that I learned during that my studies for that was some people need like to do, instead of just a checklist, right? Because that seems so long and so daunting, is to do mind mapping. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or if you use that. And sometimes I do for certain things. You can do it for programming. You can do it just to get your mind right. But you have the main focus in the middle. And then you have these lines off in other directions that are going to be your main points that you're going to focus on. And then each of those have little things. So you have this image that makes it easier to remember, kind of think back versus just this list, this laundry list or grocery list that just seems so daunting. So I think it's really important for people to realize how important our mind, how powerful our mind is, and how to get out of that fixed mindset into a growth mindset. And then you can like we talk about, in Strong Person, it's like the sky's the limit. It's like you may not ever reach the star, but kind of trying to reach the star, you're going to get further than you've ever gone. And I think that's a huge thing with our mindset as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's probably why they say like, most personal trainers out there are people's like second bootleg therapists.
Yeah.
Because we're out there on the day to day, ideally helping people believe in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
Karen, thank you so much for your time. I've done your seminars over the years, probably 3 or 4, now at this point. And I always learn something. I always have a great time. You're a stellar coach. I just have a couple I just have a couple of nerdy exercise technique questions.
Okay.
Honestly, just two um, that I like to add to my nerdy kettlebell friends.
Okay. Well,
One,
put me on the spot.
well, this is nothing you probably haven't heard before. The T-Rex, the so-called T-Rex swing,
Yes.
swinging with the bent elbows. Thoughts?
Thoughts. Okay, so in the early days, it was like a big no-no, right? Like, don't bend your arms. We have kind of changed thoughts on that, right? Everything evolves over time, but we don't do the T-Rex swing just to swing, right? Now, why do we not want people to bend their arms when they're swinging at a certification? Is because we need a standard to test by, right? So a slight bend, if you say slight and people are this, they're this, right? If you bend the arm too much, it changes the trajectory of the swing, right? So we do use the T-Rex swing or movement to progress people to snatching, right? Because with that T-Rex, because it changes direction of the movement more in an upward position, it's going to keep it close to the body and allow you for better snatching, right? So that's the main thing. Do I think it's wrong for people to just do the swing with a T-Rex arm? No. But what I think happens in a lot of cases is people don't realize when they start bending their arm and changing the direction that they're disconnecting in their lat, right? So we want that swing more with a straight arm and a packed shoulder so we can test and get them to understand that connection. And then as you become more proficient than being here, you can still keep the connection that you need and then use that as progression to snatching. And I think it does fast track people to snatching versus just the old, we'll just swing to the clock, right? Use your hips harder to get it to float higher, but then people were still flipping it. So I think now that we put the T-Rex back in, I think it fast tracks people to snatching better and safer.
Cool. Love it. Just one more, specifically for the single leg deadlift.
Okay.
When using weight, obviously one or two kettlebells. Do you like to pull your single leg deadlift from the dead stop or like floating like pseudo RDL style?
From the ground. My opinion is from the ground because that's the hardest spot, right? That's when it's truly dead. That is the deadlift, right? Getting it off the ground every time. So every time I'm going to set it right back down to that dead position and I'm going to reset. I'm going to make sure everything's connected. So I think for me, that's the most important. I kind of say, and I know other people that are into barbell would probably have a different thought process than me. I feel like, and this again, just my opinion, whether it be right or wrong, it's my opinion, is that if we pick up the bell and hold it in our hand, right, and then start that movement pattern, to me, it's more like a good morning. We're just holding it at a different spot. We're not actually deadlifting. It's not a single leg deadlift anymore. You're not lifting anything off the ground. You're holding a bell just like you would if you were holding a bar. And now you're in a hinging pattern. So that's just my opinion. I'm sure other people would probably argue with me and tell me that's crazy. But to me, if it's not on the ground, it's not a dead weight, right? It's not dead. It's not in that, like, it's different. It's an easier, it's almost like a tap and go of a deadlift, barbell deadlift. You don't have to stay tight. Unless it's really heavy, but so that's just my thought.
Love it. Well, Karen, again, thank you so much for taking the time. Anything else to share before we wrap up? Where can people find you and all that good stuff?
Website is an easy place because it has all my links to all the different social media. I'm not as active on social media anymore. I know that sounds crazy because there's so many people that are just trying to grow that following. But you can find me through my website, which is coachkarensmith.com. If I'm active on any of them, it's probably Instagram more than anything else, mostly in stories, not in like doing a lot of reels. I just kind of got burnt out over the years. So I'm not doing as much there. Outside of that, if people are interested in workshops, I'm going to try in 25 to do more of the 4-hour workshops in different gyms. If anybody's interested in that, still doing the certifications, obviously. I am moving the body weight certification from Dallas to Austin next year. So that kind of puts that in a new area. So if anybody's in Austin or wants to come to Austin, that will be in August. That should be going live. Actually, I think it went live yesterday. But still doing, like I said, kettlebells, level 1, level 2. I'm in San Diego, Seattle, maybe out of the country again. So it's just kind of like see what happens on social media or go to my website. That's probably the best way.
Love it. Keep him busy. So if anybody out there is interested and able to learn from Karen Smith in person, you simply must do it.
Thank you.
Karen, thank you again for your time, and we'll be in touch.
I appreciate it. Too, if you ever want to come back and assist any of these certs in your spare time, let me know.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you.